Good afternoon. My name is Bob Sabrin, and I am here as Sub-Dean of the Saginaw Valley chapter of the American Guild of Organists. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to this concert that is celebrating the music of a very special man. You are all in for a real treat this afternoon. We do ask that you hold your applause until the very end of the program. Thank you in advance to all our participants who are making this celebration possible, but most of all, thank you to Scott for his devotion to this parish and to the music of Christ Church. There is a reception in the lower level in the church parlor following the concert. Please join us there to greet the composer and the performers immediately following the concert. And now, Scott.
This is a very unusual and odd situation to be in. I was supposed to be doing the greeting and then turning it over to somebody else, not necessarily listening to myself go on. What I would like to do is just to do a brief little introduction to the first set of pieces on today's program, the pieces that'll make up the first half of the program. I think sometimes it's interesting to know some of the backstory to some of the pieces that are you're going to be hearing today. The first set of pieces will be pieces that I will actually be performing this afternoon up at the organ, and I do have to say that the organ is probably my first love. I've known my entire life I was a musician, and I've known most of that time, too, that I was an organist. I didn't always know what path that was always going to take, but I've known those things with most certainty, to the point that when I was in grade school, I would sit with a hymnal in my lap while the organist was playing the prelude in the pre-service, and I would have my hands underneath the book, pretending like I was playing along with. I did that underneath because my older brother was sitting next to me, and if he would have seen me doing it, it would have been a larger issue than it would have needed to have been. So with that, the first piece that we're going to hear this afternoon is a trumpet tune in F major. And this is actually probably one of my earliest pieces in terms of composition. And this is a piece that I wrote back in 1986 for my best friend in grade school was getting married. And I wrote this trumpet tune for he and his wife's procession for their wedding. And then maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, I was looking through my stacks of repertoire in my office, and I opened up a piece of music, and this trumpet tune fell out. I had forgotten about the piece, and I took it and I brought it over here and I played through it, and it wasn't too bad. So I made a few changes to it, and since then it's gone on and been published by Morningstar Publishing House. So that's had a very happy ending to that piece. That particular piece also, though I wouldn't have known it in 1986, the tune for that piece was written by the eminent American organist Paul Montz, and the text for the tune was written by the organ builder Charles Hendrickson, who's based up in Mankato, Minnesota. And I wouldn't have realized in 1986 that I was going to go on in a few years and I would be a student of Paul Montz's in Chicago. The set of 4 chorale preludes that will follow are from several different collections of pieces. The very first one, the Orientis Partibus, Christ the Lord is risen today. Please do feel free to pull the hymnals out of the rack and follow text with it as you wish. That particular piece is going to be coming out in a collection of hymn preludes being published by Concordia Publishing House. I'm guessing perhaps this spring that should be out. Erhalt uns Herr, Lord, keep us steadfast in your word. And the final one, Lasset uns mit Jesu sehen, are pieces that came out in a collection of my own chorale preludes. It was just published this past spring by Concordia Publishing House. Wie schön leuchtet is one that will hopefully be coming out in the next year in a collection. One word about the final piece in the set, the Lasset uns mit Jesu sehen. Paul Montz's earliest published work was a setting for Let Us Ever Walk with Jesus for children's voices and organ. And that particular piece was used as the procession at his wedding. And he and his wife went down the aisle to that with a children's choir directed by the important American Lutheran musician Karl Halter. Paul went on to arrange that for organ solo, and it's known much love and use in the years going on in that. So this particular piece is a setting of stanza 3, which I believe is "Let Us Ever Die with Jesus." And I've dedicated that setting to the memory of both Paul and Ruth Mont, since it was so close and dear in their lives. The hymn that will follow is a text by Martin Franzmann. Martin Franzmann is easily, hands down, one of my favorite hymn text writer poets of all time. Just an absolute genius, was not afraid to use difficult language, and when people would complain that, "Why do you write such hard hymns?" his response was, "Why should a hymn be easy?" And when you think about that, and you think about the theology that's implied in our hymnody, why should it be easy indeed? And I think this is a text that also kind of goes through the actions that happen in this building, in a sanctuary, and aptly titled, "O Fearful Place." The tune, the hymn, the setting of this text was written for a congregation in Bergholz, New York, up in western New York, right by Niagara Falls, Holy Ghost Lutheran Church, for a dear friend there, David Worth, and his choir and so forth. The next two pieces on the program are two a cappella choral pieces, "No Temple Now, No Gift of Price," and "Where Is This Stupendous Stranger?" "No Temple Now, No Gift of Price" is one of two pieces that I have jokingly referred to as my hurricane anthems, because they were written when my wife and I were living in South Florida, and true to form, I'm not always one to finish a piece on time. I mean, I usually meet the deadline at the 11th hour on things, I'm sad to admit publicly. But this is one of those pieces that I had it down to the hour. It was a commission by the Lincoln Lutheran Choir in Lincoln, Nebraska. Bill Kuhn was the director of the choir at that time and had commissioned these pieces from me, and I had finished it just as a hurricane was hitting South Florida. And if you've ever tried to get any kind of information out via mail, UPS, or even a fax in a hurricane, it's near to impossible. So that's hence the extra title there. "Where Is This Stupendous Stranger" is a very simple carol setting that I wrote maybe 3-4 years ago. And it's a wonderful text by the English poet Christopher Smart. And true to his own output, his original text has like 21 stanzas to it. And so it was part of the job was just pulling out 4 stanzas that kept things tightly, still held together as a whole. The final piece on page 3, "Grouse Mountain Lullaby." This is a wonderful piece. I did not write this piece. This is actually an arrangement. The original piece is written by Stephen Chapman. Stephen Chapman is the professor of composition at the University of Vancouver in British Columbia, and is just a wonderful man. I did my bachelor's degree at the University of Wisconsin in River Falls, and UWRF has a very important and very strong commission composer program, which for the last close to 50 years now, they have been commissioning composers to write pieces for their ensembles on a yearly basis. Then they bring the composer in who spends a week lecturing on their music on 20th century, 21st century now, compositional technique, and then a concert is presented of their works. My freshman year, Stephen Chapman was the commission composer that year, and this is one of the works that was heard. Originally written as a piano piece. Actually, I take that back. It was originally written as a music box piece to be used as incidental music in a movie. And the scene that the music box was supposed to be in was clipped out of the movie. So he was left with this lovely piece, which he transcribed into a piano piece, and then he eventually did a band arrangement of the piece, and I did an organ arrangement of the piece. The 4 sacred songs that you see at the top of page 4, two of which have very personal connections for me. "At the Font, We Start Our Journey," is a piece that I wrote for my son. And I do believe that the copyright on it goes back to 2002, which is when his copyright begins also. And the piece, it truly goes through the life of the church from baptism through Easter celebration, talking about the elements of worship and how that impacts our lives. The Hunger Carol is a wonderful text and a very hard text, I think, for many Christians to listen to, because it's basically, it is a Christmas carol, but it's all focused more on the poverty that Christ was born into, and about those in our life that share in that poverty and so forth. Lord of Our Growing Years, oh my gosh, this is another one that I wrote this as a Christmas present for my wife, and it would be very easy to write that off as just being, well, he was being cheap and didn't want to go out and shop. But it's actually more work for me to write a piece of music than it is to go out and shop. So there was plenty of labor involved with that. But it's, again, a lovely text, and I'm rather fond of that tune as well. Let Us Praise Our Gracious God, which brings up the ending of it, is a text by Jaroslav Vaida, who was easily the most important Lutheran hymn writer of the 20th century, just passed away, I believe, in 2009. One of the most gracious human beings I've ever met, and just a true poet. He knew and loved language, and he knew how to make it sing. Just very gifted man. The 7 versets on the Magnificat, 8th tone, which we will hear, was a set of pieces that was commissioned by me from Marilyn Mason, the recently retired professor of organ at the University of Michigan. And Marilyn commissioned the pieces from me, and in her own, when we were discussing what I should write for her, she just finally let out with a, well, why don't you write a set of variations on the Magnificat? That'd be great. And you will hear them very well performed today by Mr. David Saunders, a very good friend from my days at the University of Michigan. And then the final pieces on the program, I'm going to let you all in on a secret, and I feel like I'm at something akin to an AA meeting. My name is Scott, and I'm a saxophonist. And I grew up playing the saxophone. I played it well through college and so forth. Yeah, this could happen to you, Mr. Berkebine. Eventually, the true calling came back as I am a parish musician. But these were pieces that were commissioned to write for Lutheran Summer Music, a wonderful arts camp held at various Lutheran colleges throughout the country. And you will hear them very well performed today by Mr. Chad Berkebine and Mrs. Betty Auernhammer. So with all of that being said, I will come back at the intermission and tell you about the last half of the program at that time. And we do close off the first half, I believe, with the sax and piano pieces. So I'm going to hurry upstairs, and I will be playing the first portion of the program. So if you'll just indulge me a couple minutes while I leap up there, we will begin.